This is John Keats, an English romantic poet born on October 31st, 1795 to Thomas and Frances Keats. He was the oldest of the 5 siblings. His parents died before he turned 14. During this period, his love and interest for literature grew as he found comfort in them. He attended Enfield Academy, where his interest was encouraged. When he turned 15, his guardian sent him off to study medicine, and eventually studied in a London hospital. In 1816, John Keats got his license in apothecary, but decided not to practice it anymore, and instead wrote poetry. Eventually in 1817, John Keats published his first volume of poetry, Poems by John Keats. John Keats faced a lot of criticism due to his bold and daring style. However, the criticism did not put him down. He released many famous poems and sonnets, for example, Sonnet on Peace and the beautiful Ode to Autumn. However, tuberculosis got the better of him as his health started to deteriorate and eventually died in February 23, 1821. Despite his early death, his works are still well loved to this day. Today, we will discover more about his work as we discover the beautiful to Autumn. Ode to Autumn is written in a 3-stanza structure. Each line is metered in a relatively precise iambic pentameter. The iambic pentameter makes the poem sound natural, sounding like a normal human being. This enables the readers to relate to the poem better, as it seems as he himself is reading it, forming a sort of a personal relationship with the poem. To Autumn is a simple and pure poem about the calmness and gentleness of autumn. Throughout the poem, the poet addresses autumn as if it was a person. In the first stanza, John Keats describes autumn's close relationship with the sun, blooming late flowers and ripening fruits. In the second stanza, he describes the period after harvest, where there is not much work for autumn to do, and autumn is described as a thresher sitting on the granary floor, a reaper asleep on in the field, a gleaner crossing a brook, and, lastly, a cider maker. In the third and final stanza, John Keats explains that autumn has sounds different from that of spring. The harmonious sounds of gnats, lambs, crickets, robins, and swallows are distinct to autumn and autumn only. Ode to Autumn encompasses themes like excessiveness and the inevitability of death, which will be covered later as we analyze the poem line by line.
Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. The word mist here creates a gloomy and solemn effect, which suggests that autumn is a depressing season. The word mellow highlights gentleness and softness, whereas fruitfulness brings about brightness and liveliness. The usage of these two words together suggests that autumn is not that lively after all. Moreover, the usage of the word mellow creates a quiet tone, setting relatively quiet and a peaceful mood for the whole poem. Now let's take a look at the second line, close bosom friend of the maturing sun. It is unconventional for John Keats to describe autumn as a pleasant season, since autumn is usually described as being gloomy, lonely, and depressing. And it is always related to death, which is the very end of one's life. However, John Keats describes autumn as being sun's close friend. Sun often suggests something lively and zestful. Therefore, autumn, being sun's good friend, is no longer viewed as a season of death and despair. This highlights the positive aspect of viewing death. In fact, John Keats describes death and old age as representations of maturity and fruitfulness, thus conveying to the reader that death should be embraced, not feared. John Keats chose to personify autumn, allowing humans to relate better to the season. The very fact that autumn is described as being the sun's close friend suggests that everything in nature is closely related to each other. The very fact that autumn is personified also means that humans are closely related to nature as well. Sun suggests warmth and harmony, which brings us to a conclusion that autumn is a season of warmth and harmony, conspiring with him how to load and bless. Him in this case refers to the sun, The word conspiring suggests that the sun and autumn are secretly planning ways to load and bless. The very fact that they're secretly planning shows that autumn appears gloomy outside, but with deeper understanding of the season, it is in fact a pleasant season that should be celebrated. With fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run. This refers to the blessing of life. The vines are full of life, bearing fruit that reaches sweet maturity. To bend with apples the mossed cottage trees. The word bend here refers to the maturity and large amounts of apples. This shows that old age and death is a point in time where you have grown and matured, thus requiring a change as represented by bending of trees. However, there's another way of viewing the word bend. Bend may also indicate excessiveness and fill all fruits with ripeness to the core. The ripeness reaches all the way to the center of the fruit. This is praising autumn, as autumn is the time when all the fruits are ready to reap and be eaten. When the fruits are ripe, they're generally sweeter and more delicious, and thus, when the fruit is ripe with maturity, it has successfully achieved its purpose in life. To swell the gourd and plumb the hazel shells. The verbs bend, swell, and plumb signalize the excessive nature of autumn. In autumn, there is an excess of these fruits. There should always be a balance between what we have, what we don't, and what we need. Excess of life is bad. One cannot stay immortal. Living forever would not exactly cause joy because people would suffer pain. John Keats here cleverly links excess of fruits in autumn to the excess of life, and thus shows how this excess will only cause pain, and as such, it is only right and reasonable to accept.
The next line, the verb plump, is used to describe the animal process of the maturing of the nuts. This has the same effect as the former three verbs, bend, fill, and swell. This is the use of kinetic imagery. This imagery is achieved through the personification of autumn, which is viewed as alive and animate. Personification also helps to bring about the divine element of autumn, which is the mysterious power of nature to fulfill the vacantness of grains and fruits. Since autumn represents old age and death, the poet gives us an impression that old age is not gloomy. Instead, it is sanguine and meaningful. For the next line, it is describing the future budding of the kernels that drop to the ground, which will grow into new plants when spring comes. So autumn sets the preparing stage for rebirth in the coming spring. Autumn is actually not a season of dying out, it is the very start of new life. Old age and death, which are indispensable in the same way, completes our circle of life. These regular patterns in nature and human's life shows how we're closely related to nature. Furthermore, we get inspiration from nature. We change our way of looking at our lives through nature. We need nature, and we need to resort to nature for the true meaning of life. However, the tone of the poet is getting a little bit negative after this. The bees think the warm days will never cease. This imagination shows the excessiveness of growth during summer. The beautiful flowers are expected to bloom forever, which is sarcastic since it is never the case. Unlike humans who can make sense of past, present, and future, bees can only see the present. So we should never be obsessed with the superficial beauty in our lives. We should be able to see the true meaning of the development of life and the real needs of our soul. Not excessive ornament, but rebirth and the thorough contemplation. Nature serves as a kind of reminder for us, without which we will one day become addicted to the immediate gratification, which is against the sensuous nuance that romantic poems focus on. The climate cells refer to the inside of the flowers with extremely sweet and sticky nectar. Nectar is always regarded as enjoyable, however, it can also pose a threat when there is too much sweetness in our life. We may get trapped by the nice appearance of the things around us without realization. That is why the poet doesn't have much high praise on summer, but autumn, which provides us with a contemplation of our life journey. The rhetorical question in the second stanza implies that everyone knows about the harvest in autumn. But if we can see the abundance of it, where can we see the significance of old age and death? After this, autumn is personified as a carefree but charming girl, generating a sense of leisure, everything still peaceful and harmonious. It shows the poet's acceptance to the inevitability of death. That is why when faced with nature, he still enjoys the beauty of nature. Lastly, instead of just thinking about human itself, The speaker turns to nature to show his view towards death, which is unique, but shows the intimacy between the poet and the nature. So we're suggested to approach more to nature just like him.
Imagery has been used in this line as well. The word poppies is used to symbolize the usage of drugs, since poppies are used to make drugs like heroin and opium. The phrase "drowsed with the fume of poppies" makes an image of someone dosed with drugs in our mind. This creates a very solemn atmosphere and shows how death has been accepted and people are now just taking drugs because they know they're gonna die anyway. This leads to the theme of death that has been evident throughout the entire poem. And this theme of death has also been continued. The word hook symbolizes death. This is because in many cultures around the world, gods or messengers of death are always seen with a sort of weapon used to kill and bring the one meant to die to hell, and the hook is this weapon. Twine flowers are usually seen in horror movies, and this creates a very quiet atmosphere. Now this line talks about a gleaner who is defined as someone who picks up grain left in the field by the harvesters. Now this stanza also has the phrase, "Thou dost keep steady thy laden head." To me, this phrase creates a very lethargic environment and shows that death has been accepted by the people. The next two lines are, "Or by a cider press with the patient look, thou watchest the last oozings hours by hours." Cider is a European alcoholic beverage made from apple juice. Autumn here patiently watches the fruit get squeezed into a thick sugary juice. However, instead of oozing, describing intense sweetness, it could also be used to describe the atmosphere as gothic, since it's usually used for slow, thick substances like blood. The next line is, "Where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they?" Now there are two rhetorical questions in this line, which allows for a pause and allows the reader to think. This line also uses the ubi sant motive, which is Latin for "where are they?" This phrase is usually used to reflect the transience of life. By questioning it, we're questioning the essential beauty of life and asking, where is it? All of that is gone, and all that lies ahead is death. However, in a positive note, the poet could also be telling us not to only focus on spring, which is always regarded as a fresh start of life. However, autumn should be appreciated and celebrated. The phrase "think not of them" shows that people are currently thinking about the joys of spring and lamenting over it. The usage of the punctuation, like the comma, here also causes the readers not to think of spring at this point of time, but listen to what the author's perspective is. In the next part of the sentence, the phrase "thy music" is supposed to show that autumn and winter have their own music, and that very music is unique in its own way, and this should be embraced. However, the usage of the word music may seem pretty ironic, since the music of autumn and winter is usually associated with sinister and slow violin pieces which are depressing. The usage of another punctuation here, the dash, creates a dramatic pause as it stops the rhythm of the poem in the mind. It causes the reader to pause and think of what this line means. In this case, this dash makes the reader agree with what the poet has to say before moving on to the next line.
While bud clouds bloom the soft dying day. The word "soft dying" shows the use of juxtaposition, which allows the reader to establish connections and impose a meaning. It creates an effect of numbness towards death, as though death has already been accepted and is being waited for. However, it's not a tragic or violent death. Although the day is dying, it is soft and gentle. Moreover, the clouds appear to be in bloom, like flowers, as they light up with the colors of sunset. The use of bloom is a direct challenge to springtime, showing that autumn has its own beauty and uniqueness too. And touch the stubble place with rosy hue. Rosy hue represents red color, and the reddish colors of the sunlight touch which also means overwhelm the fields gently. The fields have been harvested, so all that is left is flat stubble of crop. Then in a willful choir, the small nuts mourn. This is a description of funeral imagery. It shows that death is coming and creates a very depressing mood of the poem, the whip of the end to autumn. Among the river shallows, borne aloft or sinking, as the light wind lives or dies. This shows that the current situation is between autumn and winter, and is painting this as a balance and time between life and death, highlighted by the aloft or sinking and lives or dies juxtapositions. And full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly born. Lambs are bleating near the small stream or pond that flows on a hill. The use of full-grown lambs highlights the in-between stage between the glorious ripeness of youth and painful adulthood. Furthermore, bleat is a sound used to call for help. This sound is usually used by lambs when a predator is killing them. Using bleat in this poem signifies that autumn is being killed, causing them to cry for help. H crickets sing and now we travel soft. The sound of crickets are usually expected to be very high and creates a lively mood. However, in this case, the sounds of the crickets are soft. This is ironic, and the reality is different from the expected. This could mean that they sense something different, probably the change from autumn to winter. The redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. The use of redbreast, which is a winter bird, signals the close arrival of harsh winter and eventually harsh death. Hence, the redbreast whistles as well as the gathering of swallows shows that they are preparing for migration, while autumn leaves and winter come.